Hello there. This is KHTS News Director Jade Abishan, and I'm here today with Congressman Mike Garcia over the phone. How are you doing, Mike?
Hey Jade, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So, in the time since we last talked, about 2 weeks ago exactly, a couple of things have happened. One of which was the nation observed the 20th anniversary of the destruction of the World Trade Centers and the other events of 9/11. How did you spend 9/11 this year?
Yeah, and just really hard to believe it's been 20 years already. Feels in many ways like it was just yesterday, but just absolutely a heartbreaking day, obviously. I ended up spending it in the morning with an organization in Santa Clarita called the Guardians. This is a group of folks who effectively provide support in all ways. Some of it's financial, but mostly just emotional support to the first responders, the law enforcement officers, firefighters, and their families. And they recognize on a daily basis or around in the entire year that those folks are making sacrifices and their families are making sacrifices. And so they had a lovely ceremony to commemorate the 20th anniversary out at Higher Vision in Valencia there, right off the 5 and 126 interchange. They supplemented it with a little car show and some food and drinks out there, and it was a good event to commemorate the 20th anniversary, and it was a solemn event, very heartwarming and inspired event. I had an 80-year-old gentleman come up to me afterwards, and he said that it was the most inspired that he had ever been. So it was good to see Bob Keller out there. Jason Gibbs was out there. I believe Bill Miranda was out there as well, and the KHTS team was in full force. So just a lovely event. And then in the afternoon, was able to go over to Route 66 in Canyon Country. And again, they have a nice ceremony there that they do every year for firefighters that they were able to tie it into the 9/11 anniversary as well this time. So good turnout, good Americans out there just to show their appreciation for first responders and especially on 9/11. Very good, heartwarming event as well. And then it was actually the night before. Was able to go down to Simi Valley, and at Simi Valley High School we dedicated a memorial to 12 alumni from Simi Valley High School who actually gave their lives in the Vietnam War. So this was something that hadn't been done in a while, and they used the 9/11 anniversary as a way to just commemorate that memorial and pay homage to their alum who passed away in Vietnam. So. That was a good weekend, a difficult weekend for all veterans. This is something, especially in the wake of the Afghanistan events and the debacle over the last 6 weeks, it makes it even tougher to realize that, a lot of the gains that we've made over the last 20 years have been eroded now because of what this administration has done in Afghanistan. So it was therapeutic for veterans to be able to come together and at least recognize the efforts of the global war of terror and the sacrifices that we've made as a nation over the last 20 years.
Yeah, not to toot our own horn here, but KHTS did help sponsor the Guardians event, and I can absolutely attest that it was a lovely event. Going
Yeah.
back to veterans, especially in terms of the recent news with Afghanistan, what are the sorts of things that you're hearing from veterans, either in CA 25, the district you represent, or even veterans that you come in contact with in other areas? What are you hearing? How do they feel about this?
Well, for the most part, it's heartbreaking to them, and it's hard to not have this initial reaction of hey, this was all for naught. This was all just for nothing to see us effectively leave and abandon our allies, but also abandon hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans in Afghanistan the way we did it. It sort of compels that reaction. It forces us to think that way. But that's actually not a rational way to look at it. And I am as disappointed in Biden as anyone else. But when you look back at what we've actually accomplished in Afghanistan and around the globe, frankly, in this global war on terror, we really have done God's work and the mission that was asked of us. There haven't been any meaningful terrorist attacks since 9/11. So it's hard to quantify just how many thousands of lives, tens of thousands of lives we've saved by conducting the global war on terror in multiple theaters. And so what I worry about now is moving forward, what happens in Afghanistan, and are we actually going to be more vulnerable moving forward than we were before 9/11? And that is a real concern now, and that's something that we've got to be paying attention to as leaders, as representatives in Congress, but also from the White House and his staff. And this is where I'm actually most concerned about the future of our country. But veterans should be proud of the service that they've provided. But veterans should be proud of the 20 years of stability that we've enjoyed. And I just wish the commander-in-chief shared that sentiment a little bit more. I wish the commander-in-chief actually gave a little more top cover to the active duty personnel and actually took care of them and treated them like the precious national assets that they are and human beings with families that they are. And the loss of 13 personnel just a few weeks ago is an indication that he's not really paying attention to this at the extent and to the depth that he needs to.
Yeah, it's a complex doesn't even begin to cover it. You've been heavily involved not only in trying to help Americans and their families get out of Afghanistan, but several other aspects in your course as a congressman. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've been doing since the last time we talked?
Yeah, we continue to help folks. I think when we talked, we were approaching 100. We are now over 100 people who we've been able to successfully get out. This is a blend of American citizens, but also legal permanent residents as well, people with green cards. But we're struggling right now. We're running out of options. We're still working with local special operators in the area that are on the ground and in surrounding countries to get commercial as well as private assets to move folks around to safety, to get them out of Afghanistan, step one, and get them processed. So we are having successes, just not at the rate that we were before August 29th, which is when really things started drawing down. So, but we still have Americans here. And we're still fighting for them and leaning on the State Department to not only help get those folks out, but also hold them accountable for what's been done. I mean, there's been so many mistakes made, and so getting to the root cause of what happened and who's responsible for this, ultimately it stops at the president's desk. But we are also looking into congressional hearings what's going on with Secretary Blinken's office, Secretary Austin, Defense Department Secretary. As well as General Milley, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. These guys made critical errors in their strategy and tactics. They failed to assert themselves and have the moral backbone and the courage to actually tell the president that he's screwing this up. And ultimately, they're all responsible, but the buck does stop at the president's desk, like Biden said, and that's who needs to be ultimately accountable. But we in the background, as members of Congress, are continuing to support what's been called this digital Dunkirk, which is effectively folks collaborating together through text messages, the Signal app, and various other forums to coordinate the continued evacuation of folks at risk.
That's very impressive, and I do really appreciate that callback to Dunkirk itself. That was such an impressive example of civilians and the military coming together to try to save people in danger at the drop of a hat.
That's right, and there are people still going back there to try to help. There's an American citizen in Santa Clarita. I won't say her name. She was a former Afghan refugee herself. She had to leave her family behind, and she actually is still trying to get her family out. About 6 or 7 of her family members that we are still trying to get out since the beginning. But she took it upon herself to fly back to Pakistan and actually help with the processing of folks who had made it from Afghanistan to Pakistan. And so this is the level of sacrifice that a lot of these folks continue to make as part of this Dunkirk mentality of really all hands coming together, all hands on deck to get folks out of there.
That's amazing. So for those of you who are just joining us, we are here with Congressman Mike Garcia, who's telling us about what he's been up to advocating for his constituents here in the Santa Clarita Valley and the rest of CA 25 over the past couple of weeks. Mike, last time we talked, you had planned a couple of town halls. Tell me how those went.
They went very well. We had good turnout. I was hoping to have 3 in-person events, but the reality is with LA County's restrictions for what was, looking at the time when we were planning it to be vaccine mandates, and that looks like it's coming to a reality here soon now. But we decided to do the LA County town halls for Santa Clarita, Acton, Agua Dulce, and then the Antelope Valley as teletown halls. And we had a couple thousand folks join each one of those. We had great questions. We had a good 45 minutes of Q&A for each one of those, and we have a couple dozen more that we'll respond to here ASAP. And then we had a live event down in the Simi Valley at the Reagan Library, and we probably had between 300 or 400 people show up in person, and we live streamed it there. So very good events. I think the feedback that I received was overall very positive. Obviously, this is a purple district, and not every vote that I make is not everyone's going to agree with it. So the importance of these town halls is to communicate to folks and help folks realize that, the odds of us all agreeing on everything all the time is pretty slim, and we're going to disagree on certain things, but they should know that the person representing them at the federal level is looking out for their security, looking out for their long-term interests, and doing everything that we can as an office. And we've done so much for our constituents, and so the town halls are an opportunity to highlight those successes, to discuss some of the more controversial policies and votes that we're taking. And most importantly, ask, questions, get folks to ask the questions that are on their minds and what we can do to help them. So they were great events.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Well, thank you very much for all of the insight that you've shared with us. We're coming to the end of our time here. What can we expect to see from your office in the next couple of weeks?
Well, I'm heading back to D.C. here next week, and we've got critical discussions going on around the $3.5 trillion spending bill. Pelosi's trying to have the largest tax increase in our nation's history voted on as well. And they're trying to do this all through a process called reconciliation, which basically makes it so that members of the House and Senate don't really get a chance to vote on this stuff. It's all kind of bundled up, and then the majority rules, and then it's pushed to the White House. So we're going to be fighting that fight, fighting for low taxes, low spending, trying to keep this nation solvent while we still navigate the COVID challenges that we have, and most importantly, taking care of our constituents during that whole time.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, Mike.
Thank you, Jade. Thanks for having me, as always.
Of course. For those listening out there, you'll be able to read more about Congressman Garcia and what he's been up to in Washington over on our website at hometownstation.com or on social media at KHTS Radio.